Hey, DawgNation, I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Merriweather and Tharp. Today is one of those weird days for good reasons and for some bad reasons and kind of everything else in between. I guess let me begin with this. A little bit of an issue on YouTube today. We've had smart people working on it. Don't really know what's going on there as of yet. Hope to be able to fix that soon. For now, though, we are not live on YouTube today, but we are live on Twitter and Facebook. And so for those of you who are normally with us on the one platform, thanks for hopping over and visiting us on a different platform today. We're also going to be a little out of order. Sometimes we do this. Today we're going to do that. We have a number of guests we're going to make time for on today's program. I think it's going to be really fun. A great chance to do a lot of things here today. Former Georgia tight end Troy Sadowski going to join us a little bit later on. Former Georgia quarterback Buck Bellew going to be on the program here today. So we love having the former dogs in the program. Today we get a chance to do that in really two big instances. We're going to do that kind of coming up. Then we'll kind of put the show back together again in sort of a nice order for podcast and radio and everything else. So the other good news is we're going to make some more time for your comments in today's program as we just kind of hang out and have a good time here today. No need to be anything other than in a relaxed, good mood. So in about 5 minutes from right now, we're going to talk to Buck Bellew, the former Georgia quarterback. Then we'll kind of do some of the regular segments from today's show. We'll have another guest, as I said before, Troy Sadowski, coming up after that. And then just kind of a lot of fun in between then. So before we talk to Buck, let me make some time for all of you there as well. We'll pull up our comments on Facebook. We'll talk on Facebook here today, and unfortunately won't have opportunity to talk to our YouTube folks. We'll also, by the way, put the show back up on YouTube later on, so you can still see the show on YouTube. You just won't be able to see it live today. So I apologize for that, and hopefully we'll have that fixed by tomorrow. But for now, we'll get ready to talk to you and find out what's going on with all of you. And we'll have the former Georgia quarterback on here in just a couple of minutes. Brian Anthony Cook saying, "Go Dogs." Roger Mullis still sending those happy birthday wishes out. I appreciate that. Carlos Rodriguez Scott, nice words there about how about them dogs. By the way, Spoonie Jr., normally on YouTube, saying hello to the Facebook family here today. It's always kind of nice when you can kind of bring people together, bring the Facebook folks together with the YouTube folks here. You don't want technical difficulties on one of our platforms, but when you do, it gives you a chance to meet some folks you haven't talked to there in a while. Kenny Miller, thanks for the kind words. Derek Tillman on the subject of Georgia basketball. Yeah, we won't talk a ton about that here today because at a certain point, what is there left to say? I do think that one of the things that's not a great look right now is that with the Georgia team struggling the way that it is, the fact that, like, say last night, Georgia Tech, another one of those programs that's kind of been on hard times and, you know, struggling to draw interest and struggling in a lot of ways, they pull a big upset against a team like Louisville, and they seem to be doing it, getting better over the course of the year with really the exact opposite formula of Georgia. Georgia Tech's playing good defense. Georgia's a little bit more of an offensive team. Georgia Tech is getting rebounds. Georgia, for the most part, can tend to go more up-tempo. They really don't control the glass very well. Georgia's got a lot of young players, highlighted by the freshman Anthony Edwards. Tech's a little bit more of an experience-laden team. Now, you know, Georgia fans will never find themselves envious of Georgia Tech for any reason, but when it comes to the situation with the Georgia basketball team right now, seeing Tech get better, beating the kinds of teams that Georgia could frankly only dream of beating, I think that's a little bit of an issue right now. So I think that's probably true. Carlos, thanks for the kind words. I appreciate that. A lot of folks kind of coming in here with some good stuff here. I appreciate these. Joseph Kennedy, also on the subject of basketball. Yeah, getting blown out by an average South Carolina team. Yeah, it's not good. I mean, I'm not going to sugarcoat it and say that it is. It's not good. And I'm not really quite sure what the easy solution for Georgia is. There may not be an easy solution for this. There was the nice positive moment last night, though. The early enrollees, who we've been talking about a little bit over the last few days here on DawgNation Daily, they were able to make an appearance there at halftime, I guess it was. I saw some pictures from that. So a little bit of a silver lining for otherwise a bad day for the basketball team getting the win there last night. And if you're just joining us, a little bit different version of our show today. We're going to take a lot of comments. We're going to do our show. Two fun guests coming up. Former Dog tight end Troy Sadowski, former Georgia quarterback Buck Bellew, all on the show today. So just a lot of fun conversation with you. And then for those of you that have kind of come to expect our sort of typical broadcast schedule and agenda, make sure you listen to the podcast later on, or make sure you listen to the radio show on 960 The Ref this afternoon. You can kind of hear that in that sort of typical format. Every now and then we sort of rearrange and kind of put everything else together. So we shall see how that goes here today. Patrick Davis checking in from Brunswick, Georgia. Patrick, thanks for joining us there down near the Georgia coast. We appreciate that. Michael Collins says, come on, let's talk football. Michael, put any kind of comment in there you want to, and we can talk about whatever. Winford Stein Spring, same thing for you. We're taking comments right now, so if you want to talk football, make a football comment, and we shall certainly do that. Brian Jones on the subject of the new Before the Hedges. So, last night, new chapter of that show appeared. We're actually going to have a little clip from that on today's show. So, we have embarked on a new journey for Before the Hedges. Jeff going to do that one on Wednesday nights. I'm going to focus in on some other projects as opposed to being on Before the Hedges. A lot of stuff we'll be unveiling coming up in the weeks to come. So, some really good news on that. I thought last night was a great debut for the brand new Before the Hedges format. If you missed it, Cedric Von Prawn Granger joined Jeff by phone. One of the reasons why we're going to do Before the Hedges presented by Kroger in the evening time now is because he does make it just a little easier to get recruits like Van Prawn on the show. So that new time will kind of benefit you there. Also, I think a chance, without me kind of hogging the microphone the entire time, for you to get more access to Jeff, ask him more questions, get a chance to have that interaction, much the same way we're having interaction right now, getting a chance to have that interaction with Jeff Sintel. So I think that's what's going to be really fun about Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, the brand new edition of that show. Go watch it on Facebook. We also had a little bit of a YouTube thing last night. You can see the Van Prawn interview on YouTube, but the full show, you want to see that, it's up on the DawgNation Facebook page. Jeff really, really knocked it out of the park in his first first edition of that brand new show. So we're gonna get Buck Bellew here going in just a minute. We'll get him on the phone, and we'll get ready to kind of get rocking and rolling here today. By the way, a lot of Brunswick, Georgia's checking in. Kind of interesting to see that. That's always a lot of fun to be able to do. So good stuff, good stuff there all the way around. And by the way, good to have you with us as a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp here today. Michael Collum asking the question about Zack Evans. Any news on him? That may be one of those in terms of wherever he ends up landing. We may be a long ways away from finding anything about that. The last official news on that was the fact that he was likely to take an official visit somewhere in March when the new calendar kind of pops up again. So that's kind of the latest on that. For us now, though, in our program, as we said before, every now and then we have a good time kind of going out of order on today's show. We'll do that with a chance to bring in a great guest, national championship winning quarterback, and a guy that has terrific insight on the current Dogs as well. Let's get ready to talk to Buck Bellew. It's always fun for me to get a chance to talk to Buck Bellew here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, the former Georgia quarterback and a guy who's still a terrific voice when it comes to addressing this team and kind of everything going on. Buck, we appreciate you being a part of the program today, and I hope you're doing well. Thanks for being back on with us.
Hey, back at you, B.A. Just spent some time this morning looking at Kendall Milton and Mikael Sherman, two of these five stars coming in this 2020 class. Really impressed with both of those guys.
Yeah, it really is amazing, Buck, how Kirby has kind of kept this recruiting machine working. And, Kendall Milton's an early enrollee on campus right now. It certainly seems to my eyes. I saw some pictures of him again last night because he was at the basketball game. I think one of the things about the program right now, and Georgia's not the only program that does this, there are a lot of them, but you get these guys on campus, get them into a nutrition program, get them into a strength program, conditioning program, and the ways in which the bodies can change so quickly. Now, Kendall was already in good shape, but it seems like he's in, kind of extra good shape, already plussed his physical condition already. It's really amazing the transformation that occurs for these guys so quickly once they get on campus, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. You're just taking it to a new level, and these guys, I'm sure, are excited about earning their way, and it starts quickly. Everybody's, they know who you are when you step on campus, the rest of the team, and they're anxious to test you out a little bit, see what kind of guy you are. So a lot of challenges for all of these freshmen that will be arriving before the start of the season, and I tell you, looking forward to seeing a lot of these guys.
Let me talk to you about the quarterback position here for a moment, because I think a lot of people are also curious about how that's going to look for Georgia this year. A transition away from Jake Fromm, a guy we got very used to seeing. Certainly the expectation is, I think anyway, that Jamie Newman, the transfer from Wake Forest, is the favorite to win that job. And just given the way that he's played, given the fact that he'll be a part of a new offensive coordinator, there is a chance that offense looks a good bit different this year. So if you don't mind, I guess just give me your thoughts about the current state of the quarterback situation and maybe some expectations you might have for the Georgia offense.
Well, just looking at Jamie Newman and what he did a year ago at Wake Forest, I was really impressed watching him play the game. And the RPO comes to mind. I mean, they did it a little differently there with the Demon Deacons, a little slower developing RPO where he would run the ball between the tackles. But I tell you, that comes in handy down in the red zone. I really like the way, too, they spread the field, and Newman did a good job of determining where his best matchup was, and gave that receiver a chance to make some plays on those 50-50 balls down the field. So not sure yet, but apparently it looks like Newman is a really good fit for what Todd Monken wants to do offensively. And certainly Georgia will incorporate the quarterback run into the offense, which is exciting, too. I'm excited to see Carson Beck. Studied and heard about this guy for a couple of years now, and have a former teammate off that national title team, Joe Cremans, that has seen this guy grow up down in Jacksonville and develop as a quarterback. And he seems to have everything you need to be successful. So I'm anxious to see him come the spring. And then Dwan Mathis, I think I'm with everyone else, including the coaching staff, wondering exactly what they have as far as Mathis and his skill set goes. He's obviously had some challenges. But I tell you what, man, it seemed like a year ago or two, right? I mean, they were worried that you went in the quarterback room and there was 3 bodies in there. Now I think they got about 10 or 12 guys in there.
It certainly seems that way, Buck, and there's no doubt about that. When it comes to Mathis for a moment, obviously we don't know about his health situation yet. We hope that he's makes his return to full health. We can get a chance to evaluate him as a quarterback. But if we assume for a moment that he is going to be healthy, that the situation with the surgery that he had to have, if that's all healed up good, how much of a benefit is it for him that he spent a year on campus already? Even if he wasn't able to play, was practicing some, and I think by the end of the year even scrimmaging some. But if he's doing those kinds of things, getting a chance to be on campus for a year, how beneficial will that be for him when he gets a chance to finally insert himself into a competition, knowing that he's got something that Carson Beck doesn't have right now, which is a year under his belt, a chance to kind of, even if it's a different offensive system, still a chance to kind of get more acclimated to college life. How much will that help Mathis eventually?
Well, I think it will help him. Just the experience of, being around the campus, knowing the guys. All these quarterbacks are starting at square zero, right, with the offense, with what Monken's bringing in here. So it's a fair fight there. But, just being comfortable, I think, is a really big thing for a quarterback. And, these other teammates know you, too. So that's a big advantage. We saw Jake Fromm come in and basically take over immediately. And, I think, if you look at 100 quarterbacks, there's probably 2 or 3 that are really ready to step in as a freshman in college and do everything you need the quarterback to do to win big. So it just makes Fromm look even better, looking back on what he was able to take on. But it's an advantage. Just the comfort level comes to mind with the offense, what the defense is doing. You've got to, instead of guessing what the defense is doing, you know exactly what they're doing year number 2 through the program. So it should be a big advantage for him.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And Carson Beck, of course, getting a chance to be an early enrollee right now. And, we've heard him talk about that experience. Georgia's published some recent videos with him where he's discussed that. But, we've seen Georgia in the last couple of years, in some cases, maybe move away from quarterbacks because they weren't going to be able to show up and be a part of the early enrollee process. And when you have a chance to be in campus in January and kind of leading into spring practice, getting a chance to kind of go through that, that's also kind of a nice advantage, right? Even if Beck does end up becoming the starter this year because Newman's too difficult to unseed, that's a great learning opportunity that will make him, I'm assuming anyway, more experienced in season when he finally does get a chance to play some this fall. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, he's running the scout team during bowl practice, so he got a taste of it, and I know he's looking forward to spring, getting out there and showing the team and the staff what he can do. Again, I'm really impressed with the skill set. He, reminds me a little bit of Peyton Manning as far as his pocket presence, and, he can make all the throws. He moves around a little better. Saw him, doing a little more of that his senior year here, running with it. some more and showing some of that skill set off. But I think Joe Burrow, Luck, guys like that, similar skill set. You know, this guy obviously has already earned the respect of a lot of these freshmen in this 2020 class with his recruiting abilities, too. So everybody's, man, this is exciting as the turnover with the offense and the quarterback spot. And I'm just like everybody else. Can't wait to see how it works out.
Let me finish with this, Buck, if you don't mind. There's also, I think, some curiosity of just how different things are going to be. Even taking away the transition to a new quarterback and all the new blood, as you mentioned, that Georgia has in that quarterback room. It's also Todd Monken now, who, if you look at what he did with, like, say, the Tampa Bay Bucks or his time as head coach at Southern Miss or offensive coordinator at Oklahoma State, his tendencies have clearly been a good bit different than what Georgia has been prior to this under Kirby Smart. I guess let me ask you, how much do you want the offensive philosophy to change? How much do you think it needs to change? And if you had to guess, how much of it do you think will change this upcoming season compared to what we have seen from the Dogs the last few years?
Well, I got a kick out of hearing Kirby say that, hey, we're running the same plays LSU's running. They're just running a little better. And, Monken's got this rep for wanting to throw the ball vertically down the field, and I sort of chuckle at that, too. I'm sure that, the ex-offensive coordinator really liked throwing it deep, too. But think about the SEC title game. They go deep first three plays of the game, if I remember correctly, and had chances to make big plays on all three plays, and the receivers are just not able to do it. So, the scheme's got to match up with the personnel. And, I think this wide receiver core coming in, you got some guys that could make an immediate splash, like Rosemead, who's very polished, coming in. He can get off that press coverage. We saw our George Pickens had to learn these things during the course of the year. Arian Smith looks like a good fit at the slot, running that underneath stuff. We saw Mecole Hardman running. Jermaine Burton looks to me like the most talented, skilled receiver out of the group. Excited to see what he does. And Justin Robinson looks like he's a player, too. So Darnell Washington at tight end. This whoever the quarterback's going to be, and I'm guessing it'll be Jamie Newman to get started here. He's going to have a lot more weapons around him than Fromm did a year ago.
No, I think that's exactly right, Buck. I appreciate you being here on our program today. And for those who are in the Atlanta area, they want to check you out on the radio or maybe find you on social media, how can people get a little bit more Buck Belue in their lives?
Well, we're on Twitter quite a bit working at Buck Belue 8 and the Buck and Kincaid Show on the Fan. Noon to 3, 20 years running, man. We're still at it. Get the app. You can listen anywhere, anytime. D.A., always a pleasure being with you, buddy.
Yeah,
Keep up the good work.
Thanks so much, Buck. It's great to talk to you. Appreciate that. Good stuff there. Buck Belue, 680 The Fan in Atlanta, radio host, of course, national champion quarterback with the Georgia Bulldogs, and a guy that is still looking forward to seeing the Dogs put some good things together here for the 2020 season. By the way, I thought it was really interesting. And I noticed this myself. So Buck said, hey, you love Jamie Newman because Jamie Newman brings that sort of athleticism to the table. And he says, and to be honest with you, Carson Beck, some of the film that I've seen from him, this is Buck talking a moment ago, Carson Beck, some of the film that I've seen from him, boy, he looks like he's going to really be pretty athletic there as well. And obviously we know that Dwan Mathis kind of has that dimension of his game. Isn't it interesting now? And I don't know what it means necessarily, but it is kind of interesting that the quarterbacks that Georgia has, and as Buck said, there's also like 8,000, preferred walk-ons. There's an army of guys that are currently sort of in the mix here. I think as many as 8, maybe, trying to, sort of make some sort of hay at the quarterback spot here at UGA. But primarily the ones that are kind of, under scholarship and in some sort of competition. Primary backup, even last year, Stetson Bennett is a guy who has a little bit of an ability to kind of move around in the pocket, keep plays alive with his legs. It certainly seems like right now that there's a little bit of a concerted effort to have that be a little bit more of a part of the story with what Georgia does offensively. Now, I don't know if our own eyes are going to notice that much of a change with the offense like that during the season. I'm not really sure one way or another. But it is interesting that you sort of recognize that dimension with a lot of these guys. And Beck in particular, he's on campus right now, and we've kind of made mention of the video that DJ Shockley did where they talked to all these early enrollees and kind of got some some thoughts from them about being on campus. And one of the things that you kind of talked to, you heard Beck say, when he was speaking on this video is in that senior year with a little bit different situation, maybe a little bit of a different kind of talent level around him compared to what he'd enjoyed his junior year. It actually gave Beck the freedom to work on some new things and doing some more stuff with his legs, being a little bit more athletic in the pocket, maybe in some cases forced to be that way, has kind of caused him to develop into a new quarterback or a little bit different kind of quarterback than he otherwise would have been. Because let's face it, at the high school level, and as a junior down at his school, I think that Beck probably really experienced this. At the high school level, if you're a good quarterback and you've got good receivers, then someone's always going to be open, right? I mean, you go watch these really good quarterbacks playing on these really deep and talented teams, you see a lot of examples of that. If you're just willing to be patient enough, you'll eventually find someone to throw the ball to. That's just kind of the nature of high school football. And yet, when your talent level changes, and certainly the indication we've gotten, Beck himself has even addressed this a bit, maybe his talent level changed, the guys he was playing with, maybe that change and that transition from that junior to a senior season. And at that time, all of a sudden, he's not seeing open receivers like he once saw. You know, he's not finding those dependable targets to deliver the football to the way that he once did. And all of a sudden now, he's been asked to do a little bit different kind of stuff. And you know, from that standpoint, maybe he's going to be better because of that. And maybe he's going to be more of a threat in this quarterback competition this spring because of that. And when Brock Vandegrift arrives as a part of the class of 2021, at that point in time, Beck, no matter how much he plays this year, will have had that year on campus and what we presume in an offense that'll be a little bit more similar to what Georgia will be going into the second year of in 2021. That could be a really, really nice I guess, feather for him to have in his cap and an opportunity for him to be a serious contender to eventually one day be the starting quarterback here at the University of Georgia. One more point on all this, by the way, before we kind of move on and do something different. I think it's also interesting to hear Buck Bellew talk about Dwan Mathis there as well. And I think the point about Mathis is, and I love the way that Buck said this, man, I think we're all just sort of ready to see what UGA has in him. And listen, I think this is true for two reasons. First of all, well before there was any kind of health issue for Mathis whatsoever, there was this sort of natural curiosity of, who is this former Ohio State commit that Georgia very late and quickly kind of got involved with and was able to bring in as part of this 2019 class? Exactly what is this young man? What does he bring to the table? You see a little bit of that at spring practice. Some of what you saw from him on G-Day a year ago was actually pretty fun to see, pretty nice. Then obviously there's the thing that no one could have ever predicted, the cyst and the surgery and then the long recovery that any kind of health issue like that kind of has as a part of that. And now we're sort of left to wonder. We still have the same level of curiosity about who Mathis might be as a player and just how high that ceiling might be. And in addition to that, now you've also got the health concern to deal with as well. It is certainly a fascinating, I guess, almost concoction of storylines that kind of come together for Mathis. But I would caution you, don't count this young man out as a part of a competition for the Georgia quarterback spot really in any year. I think that he's someone that brings a lot to the table. And as you examine what Carson Beck does well, and you examine what future quarterbacks maybe beyond Jamie Newman do well, I think that Dwan Mathis is going to still be heard from in a UGA uniform. And it is really, really fun to have Buck Bellew talk about all of that as part of DawgNation Daily today, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. All right, it's good to have with us on our program here today. As we said before, kind of going a little bit out of order today, talking about a bunch of different stuff, but nonetheless having a really good time with it all. Here is what else we're going to do. We're going to get a former Georgia tight end coming up in just a moment, a guy we've had on the show before, a guy who's also very much like Buck Bellew, a big fan of the program. I'm talking about not our program, but the University of Georgia's football program. Big fan of all that, a guy that's just really doing some terrific things. It's Troy Sadowski, guy played a long time in the NFL, was an All-American at UGA. He's got great insight into a number of topics. We're going to do that with him here coming up. Before that, though, we do have a little bit of time here to kind of deal with some other stuff. And one of the things I want to deal with is some things that happened with ESPN kind of putting out their list of top SEC games around the country for 2020, and really all the top national games there as well. But in addition, to that list, a lot of these do kind of come from the SEC. Georgia, Alabama, will obviously talk a lot about that, but there's also a lot of other high-profile games around the SEC. So before we get Troy Sadowski here in a minute, we'll kind of highlight some of that kind of stuff and have some fun with that. We have a couple of minutes to kind of get some of your comments there as well. So we'll do that before we kind of move on. So let me get a couple comments. Then it'll be Troy Sadowski and a chance for us to highlight what ESPN is saying about the top games around college football. And by the way, for those of you who are still kind of having those issues on YouTube and being with us on a different platform today, we certainly appreciate that. Randy Hall on the subject of Trey McKitty, that is a guy that you can certainly expect some big things from. I think one of those tight ends that Georgia can really get some good use out of. The tight end position in particular is going to be, kind of an interesting storyline for Georgia this year. But the role in which McKitty plays in that, because he has had some experience at Florida State, he has done some things there. I think that should be pretty interesting to be able to see. James Crump on the subject of Dwan Mathis and his health. Yeah, listen, I'm rooting for that young man. I really am. And I think, as I said before, I think you're going to hear from him before it's all said and done. Matt Rukavina talking about Nate McBride. Yeah, listen, that's one of those, former, kind of heroes in the comments section. I haven't heard as much about him, but, McBride's one of those guys that I haven't given up yet on still hearing from in a big way in a Georgia uniform. Robert Barnes says it doesn't matter what any player did last year. It's a whole different animal when you get to Athens. I don't know what that's in reference to, maybe McKitty, but I do think experience matters. I mean, I think that we're in an age one way or another, and some people are like a little bit more pro-transfer portal, and some people are a little bit less fond of the transfer portal. I think I'm probably one that has grown tired of the transfer portal over the course of the way that it's been employed here over the course of the last year plus. But we are in an era one way or another where the transfer portal is in some form or fashion is here to stay. And there is still a chance that the rules in terms of how you transfer and how you move on could get even less restrictive in the time to come. I know there are a lot of college basketball coaches, for instance, who kind of feel that could be on the horizon. So how you utilize that, how you manage your roster, I think is going to get to be really, really important. And I think we're going to see a lot of examples of that in the future. And listen, for as much as we kind of highlight high school seniors and 5-star this and very highly rated 4-star this, there is still something to be said for a player that's gotten some experience. And we've seen Georgia utilize that well. Now, not every transfer Georgia's brought in has worked exactly as maybe the best case scenario would have hoped that it would be. But the truth is no one's going to bat 1,000 on any type of issue. So I'm a big believer that good programs are going to utilize the transfer portal, and they're going to do that. They're going to do that well. Let's see if we can have one more comment here before we kind of move on. Carlos Rodriguez Scott saying that he hopes that Dwan Mathis is cleared to play and kind of gets that full clearance. Yeah, I do too. I do too. I mean, it's just one of those things of there are only so many people who were sort of good enough, who achieve the level of this person can play at the major college football level, right? And there are even fewer of those that can play the most high-profile position, quarterback. One way or another, Dwan Mathis is clearly a quarterback prospect good enough to play somewhere. Will he ever emerge as the starting quarterback at Georgia? That's a debate, right? There are going to be a lot of guys who are part of that competition. We may never know. But he's obviously good enough to play somewhere, and it could very well be that place ends up being UGA. And you just hope the health situation clears its way up so he gets a chance to do that. I think that's really, really well said. All right, a little bit of SEC talk, then it's Troy Sadowski, and a really, really fun time to have all of you with us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
So it's always one of my favorite things to do on the program is kind of look at the way that the hype is building. And by the way, great stuff from Buck Bellew, the former Georgia quarterback, a terrific guest to have on the program, and just a guy with terrific insight around UGA, and also one of those guys that's kind of fun to kind of catch up with in the offseason. Because as I said, the way in which the ball kind of gets rolling, the way in which the narrative starts to form for the upcoming season this time of year is always really fun for me. And that's one of the things we try to highlight when we go around the SEC, or as we call it, cruise around the SEC, courtesy of our friends at Royal Caribbean. And speaking of them, I wanted to take for a moment to mention one of the great ships in their fleet, something that you've got to check out for yourself if you haven't seen them. I'm talking about Oasis of the Seas. This is the most awarded ship at sea, and it recently underwent the biggest amplification ever. Now, what is an amplification, you may say? Amplifying the ship simply means reimagining them and adding some new things, making them bigger, making them better. Then if you've experienced the ship before, you've not experienced it like this. Let me give you a couple of examples. Ultimate Abyss has been added. It's the tallest slide at sea. Can you imagine being a part of that? 10 stories, you're plunging down, adding Playmaker Sports Bar and Arcade. We love the idea of a sports bar on a ship at sea, right there with the ocean around you. That's so much fun. You've also got other kinds of nightclub bar venues like Music Hall, the Lime and Coconut, Bionic Bar. We've got the robotic arms. Just a lot of really fun things. You need a vacation. We're talking about this in my household as well, when we're going to be able to be on one of these Royal Caribbean cruises. So contact your travel advisor or reach out to my friends at the Cruise and Vacation Authority. The number to get in touch with them is 800-326-4971. That's 800-326-4971. You can get in touch with the Cruise and Vacation Authority. Get your Royal Caribbean cruise vacation planned. And by the way, make sure you tell them you heard about them right here with us on DawgNation Daily. So let me highlight a few of these other SEC games that ESPN has mentioned as the ones to watch for this upcoming season. First of all, one of the games that gets mentioned is Texas at LSU coming up on September 12th. Now, here is what I think is interesting about LSU really against anyone, but in this return date between the Longhorns and the Tigers, especially given the fact that there's going to be a little bit of Texas hype this season after the letdown year a year ago for Tom Herman. Exactly what is LSU going to look like? Because we've been kind of come to conditioned to believe that once you win that national championship, once you do that, you're kind of in the club, and you do like Alabama's done or like Clemson's done, you sort of hang around there, year after year after year. But there was so much turnover, so much change for LSU. Is that really a possibility? Replacing quarterback Joe Burrow, replacing Joe Brady, Scott Linehan, and I guess Miles Brennan, the tandem they're going to be tasked with doing that. Is LSU still national championship good? We may find out on September 12th against Texas. Then ESPN highlights Auburn against North Carolina also early in the season. I think that's an interesting game for Georgia fans in particular because this is a different kind of year for UGA, one in which you will be playing Auburn much, much earlier than you're used to playing them. You'll be kind of going with them in October, where it's been November in the past. And what is Auburn? Also in a kind of a weird transition year. For LSU, the transition's on offense. You lose all that talent, quarterback, play caller, everything else, or at least passing game coordinator. For Auburn, it's about a defense where Kevin Steele's going to make a whole bunch of money, but there's no Derek Brown there anymore. A lot of those pieces that you've come to get used to seeing in that Auburn uniform, they're not quite there anymore. Is Bo Nix ready to take that sort of next step in year two there in the program? I think that's a game that's pretty interesting to kind of highlight when it comes to that. Obviously, Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin gets on here a lot. It's one of those deals where I think that Lane Kiffin is a lot more interesting when he's not coaching somewhere big, right? I mean, think about Kiffin when he first left Alabama. He's active on Twitter. He's talking real big and everything like that. But it's almost like when you put him back in a high-profile spot, you get a guy that you're kind of reminded of. Oh, well, he's had some issues. Oh, he's not always thrived in the spotlight. There were some weird moments for him at Tennessee. Kind of got himself in some hot water with Urban Meyer. Ended up taking a big blowout loss. Talked a big game and ultimately wasn't able to back it up. The Tennessee program, I believe, actually kind of regressed because of the year that Lane Kiffin's spent there. All the expensive assistant coaches that they were kind of left holding the bag for once Lane Kiffin departed. This is one of those deals where I think that Kiffin's a good play caller. I think he was a good offensive coordinator at Alabama. But as a high-profile head coach, sometimes the steak doesn't exactly match the sizzle, if you know what I'm saying. So you see Kiffin and Ole Miss showing up here a lot. And obviously that's why Ole Miss hired him, that they kind of want that attention that a guy like Kiffin brings to the table. But I'm just not quite so sure that the results themselves are going to actually kind of work out all that way. Obviously, there's a lot more SEC games on here. I'll put a link to this. We post the show a little bit later on at the world-famous DawgNation.com. By the way, here's a game to think about. Speaking of Tennessee, how about Tennessee and Oklahoma also coming up in early September there as well? So it's a fun time. There is a lot to think about in terms of what the upcoming season might be. ESPN does a good job of kind of highlighting some of those games. So as I said before, if you didn't get a chance to read the article, when I post the podcast, I'll make sure I put a link to that there. But for now, here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp, as promised, want to bring in another former Dog. Always great to be able to do that on our show as we get ready to say hello to the former Georgia tight end, Troy Sadowski, former All-American with the program, and a guy who still has a lot to say about the situation there in Athens. Troy, thanks so much for being a part of our show today. We really appreciate you being with us. Troy, you got me? Thanks so much for being a part of the show today.
Yep, can you hear me now?
I sure can. I really appreciate that. Thanks for being here. And, one of the things that I said, one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on the show is, so I've written at DawgNation.com a piece about how I think UGA fans would be excited if the Falcons, who need a running back, would draft DeAndre Swift. We haven't seen a ton of former Dogs end up playing for the Atlanta Falcons. You spent most of your NFL career elsewhere, but you were initially a part of the Atlanta Falcons organization when you first entered the NFL. Now, at the time, you didn't know exactly how that was going to work out, but as someone who, from the state of Georgia, played at UGA, was it fun for you to get a chance to at least begin your NFL journey as a part of the Atlanta Falcons?
Oh, absolutely. It was getting a chance to play in front of the local crowd was always a big plus. And like you said, you never know what's going to happen, when you're going to get drafted, where you're going to go. But to be able to stay at home was definitely a big plus for me.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And, of course, we all obviously remember the great work that you did as part of the Georgia program. And, obviously the tight end position is what you did there to such great effect. And now as Georgia transitions, what we think anyway, to a new offense, maybe a little bit different kind of play caller, Todd Monken in that role there. This is a guy that's been a little more up-tempo. You may say a little bit more sort of air raid style spread, at least in some parts of his, coaching past. Do you get a sense for how the tight ends are going to be used at Georgia going forward and what that role is going to be? We've kind of gotten used to seeing two tight ends on the field together at the same time in the previous years under Kirby Smart. I'm not quite so sure that's much a part of the plan here moving forward. How would you expect tight ends to be used now with a brand new offensive coordinator, one who has a little bit different, at least the sense that I get, a little bit different offensive philosophy than what Georgia's had in the past?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. When I was there, we were blockers first, receivers second, and we knew that, and we accepted our role in the offense, and it's kind of evolved a little bit over time. But now, I mean, they have talent on the roster, and then bringing in a guy like Darnell Washington and his skill set and his abilities, I mean, they have that opportunity to maybe go with a one tight end formation, move him out, flex him out a little bit, and I mean, you're talking 6'8", 260 pounds. That's a pretty big target right there. But to be able to take advantage of that, looking forward to it. I think the offense is going to put up a little bit more number-wise when it comes to that, because when you have that new element that we're going to have with a dual threat quarterback, as long as Newman comes along like that and does what everybody expects him to do, I think it's going to be an exciting season.
One of the things that Kirby Smart has talked about in the past when it comes to your position, the tight end spot, is to really have the football delivered to you, you need to be a matchup nightmare, right? You need to be able to run past guys or leap over them. You just need to be able to do something physically that allows you to get open when you're battling against these elite athletes, especially in the interior of these SEC defenses. It probably goes without saying, but is it safe to say that when you're a guy like Washington who has that size and the speed to go along with that, getting open in the middle of the field is just made so much easier by that kind of athleticism matched by the kind of size that you just don't see from a lot of players at that position, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it goes with the wide receivers as well. I mean, the biggest key is, can the receiver, whether it's a wide receiver or a tight end, can they create separation? Can they give the quarterback a good look when they're coming out of their break? And that's what you see the Alabamas, the Oklahomas, the LSU. They have those receivers that are creating separation, and they're making it an easy throw on the quarterback, and the quarterback's getting the ball in the hands of these guys that can make things happen. And that's one of the things that I would like to see Georgia do a little bit more, is get the ball in the hands of these guys that can run with the ball after the catch.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great thing to see. The other thing we've kind of seen Georgia do at the tight end spot over the last couple of years, this year's going to be another example of that, is Georgia looking to find experience at that spot when they can. Bringing in Eli Wolf last year as a graduate transfer tight end. This year it'll be Trey McKitty from Florida State. Obviously, as you said before, Georgia's actually, at least in terms of the numbers of players involved, pretty deep at this position. A lot of folks want to see more of John Fitzpatrick, want to see more of Rylan Goody, for instance. Brett Seither is a guy that Georgia brought in as part of the 2019 class. And yet, somehow, Georgia continues to value the opportunity to also add a guy in that sort of grad transfer spot who's played that before. Why do you think experience matters so much at the tight end position, given the fact that that's the spot that you know really well?
Well, because they're asking a lot of these guys. Not only do you have to play the Y position, you got to play the F, the H, the X, and the Z, depending on what type of formation and personnel that are in there. So there's a lot that you have to learn when it comes to that. So, a lot of people think that it's just you line 11 people up and they just beat the crud out of each other, and that's part of it. But everybody has a specific thing that they're supposed to be doing on every play, and if everybody does that, it runs like a well-oiled machine. And that's what we're looking for. So when it comes to the tight ends, they're asking them to learn a lot more than just the tight end position. They have to learn all these other different positions. And coming in there, I understand that with the transfers, I call them plug-and-play players.
Sure.
Those are great. We can bring people in that way to help when it comes to filling gaps, when it comes to experience and letting some of these younger tight ends mature. But I think what we have on our roster, we just need to get them coached up. That's the biggest part. I mean, the Kirby Smart and his staff are doing a phenomenal job about going out there and recruiting and who they're recruiting and getting these guys to come in. But once you get them on campus, you got to coach them up, and I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, it seems like, Troy, and we'll finish with this, Georgia's collecting this talent at such a rapid rate, and yet in terms of what Alabama's doing, what Clemson's doing, now LSU kind of in that fold, we've never seen more good players congregated on so few teams. And so I think your point about needing to do something with the talent you have is a good one, just given the fact that that talent advantage isn't quite as vast as it would have been in the past with the kind of players that Georgia's put together here, because those sort of top 4, top 5 recruiting teams are just getting way more than their fair share when it comes to really good players. And so when you play in an SEC championship game or a team like a Clemson or an Ohio State in a college football playoff, it's hard to have a talent advantage over them because at least it seems like they're also recruiting really well too.
Oh, absolutely. You're seeing a group of about 5 or 6 schools that, like you said, the talent is pooling up. The parking lots are full of talent, and it's just amazing. I mean, to finish with the number 1 ranked SEC and number 1 ranked national recruiting class, and then last year we were number 1 in the SEC, 2 in the nation. That's pretty impressive. So they're doing what they need to do to identify the talent and get the talent there. But, it is, you got that top group, top tier 5 or 6 teams across the country that are dominating, and the talent pool for them, it is just, they're loaded with sharks. I saw the other day that Major Burns made a comment that sharks swim with sharks. and I love that. And you got to love a kid with the name Major Burns. So I'm expecting big things from him in this recruiting class, and look forward to seeing, they got a lot of them on campus right now. They'll be able to participate in the spring, and just to see how this team comes together, it's going to be nice and exciting to see.
Well, Troy, I will tell you that we love having you on the show. We just love hearing from the guys who've done it in this uniform, and we have such great memories of seeing between the hedges. You're obviously one of those names. We appreciate the great career you put together there at UGA, and the fact that you're still a big fan of the program that you played for, and the fact that you spent a little time with us here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. So thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you being here, and I hope we get a chance to speak to you soon.
Oh, my pleasure. Absolutely. Anytime. Would love to come on.
All right, good stuff there from Troy Sadowski, the former Georgia tight end. And by the way, for those of you who are kind of with us here today, and you're kind of used to a little bit different kind of format, we appreciate your patience and all of that. And by the way, for those of you who've kind of here with us today because of the YouTube issue, listen, it's always going to be something. There's always going to be something going on. Frankly, this is never quite as easy as we make it look from time to time and day to day. So we just appreciate you being with us here as a part of the show. And the great news is that we are not done. We'll still make time for more of your comments. That's still yet to come. I've got some thoughts and some things I want to say about the 2021 recruiting cycle. It's about to get going here in earnest. So we're going to do a lot of that and just have a really good time with all of you here today. So we appreciate you allowing us to do that. So before we're done, why don't we get ready to kind of roll on and do that? I think that as we head towards the really kind of the heating up portion of the 2021 cycle, we're about to see some really fun things, some really big names who are about to start making some noise here. And there are a few things in particular about this particular recruiting cycle for Georgia that I think it's going to make it, I don't want to say more fun than the others because that wouldn't necessarily be fair, but there are a few things specifically about this 2021 class that I think that Georgia fans might enjoy. So when we do that for a few minutes, we'll take more of your comments after that. As we do DawgNation Daily today, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans presented by Merriweather and Tharp. The beginning of the show begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Merriweather and Tharp, your source for Georgia divorce. Find them online at theatlantadivorceteam.com.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
So I had a great experience last night. Now, last night was my birthday, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. But in this particular moment, I'm not even actually referencing my birthday. I got a chance to do what many of you have done for a long time. I got a chance to sort of sit back and watch a little bit of DawgNation's recruiting insider, Jeff Sentell. For those of you that may not be aware, we kind of began a new journey on our Before the Hedges program. It's presented by Kroger, and Jeff doing this at night now. Really fun interview with Cedric Von Prawn-Granger, and you got to check it out for yourself. Go to the DawgNation Facebook page. The Cedric Von Prawn interview's up on YouTube. You can see that. Just check all of that out. But as I'm watching the show, I'm thinking, man, this 2021 cycle is going to be really, really fun as we head towards the end of the year and the culmination of all this the same way that it just happened for the 2020 class. I'm already really excited about 2021. And I think part of that is because I'm ready for winter to be over. It's like been cold and rainy now for what seems like 1,000 years here in Georgia. And as the weather kind of heats up, not only does spring practice begin in Athens, and we're not too far away from that, by the way, the start of all of that. But in addition to that, you kind of also start to get that little camp circuit going a little bit more. A lot of these recruits start talking more about their process. They whittle down those lists of finalists. And we're going to have some movement here coming up with recruiting over the course of the next few weeks that I'm just really excited about. I'm already liking a lot of what I see for the 2021 class. So watching Jeff last night doing this on Before the Hedges, thinking about all of this, it kind of led me to this point of, I think right now there may be 5 reasons why what we're about to see with 2021 recruiting is going to get really, really fun. So let me see if I can kind of rattle through all of these, and you can decide for yourself if you agree with me or not. Let me first of all start with Barrett Carter. Very impressive linebacker prospect out of North Gwinnett and Suwanee, Georgia. Carter here this week has dropped his top 11. Now, I am absolutely a gigantic fan of the double-digit list of finalists. Was it Amarius Mims the other day that had a top 12? And Carter's got a top 11. I don't know that anyone yet has topped our buddy Jay Hardy last year, who had a top 16 at one point. I just like all of this. You see that huge list of finalists. Obviously, Georgia's one of those. We think if Carter had more than a top 11, Georgia would obviously, or I should say less than a top 11, Georgia would obviously be a little bit more in the I guess, rarefied version of his finalists. But nonetheless, Carter is just going to be a fun name to watch here. You know, we didn't do a lot of linebacker talk with Georgia with the 2020 class because Georgia had recruited so many really good linebackers in the previous cycles. Now, Georgia still brings in a guy like Mikal Sherman, so it didn't completely ignore the linebacker spot. But for the most part, linebacker wasn't a big part of what Georgia did this past cycle. But I believe that's going to be more true, though, for 2021. I think that Carter's going to be a big part of that. In fact, I mentioned off the top of the show that I enjoyed seeing Jeff last night on Before the Hedges, and one of the things he kind of got into with Carter dropping his top 11, with Georgia obviously being interested in him, Jeff did kind of go into a little bit more detail about where things stand with Carter and why this is going to be a big name to know for Georgia in 2021. The linebacker from Suwanee. Let me let you hear a little bit of Jeff Sentell.
I think this guy is an indispensable piece for Georgia, a priority in the 2021 class. He's a guy that's rated right now as an outside backer, number 6 outside linebacker, number 100 overall in the 24/7 Sports Composite. Just wait, folks. When the industry kind of re-racks Barrett Carter as an inside backer, that's what Georgia's recruiting him as. A lot of schools are recruiting him as, because he doesn't have that ideal 6'4", 6'5" length as an outside backer. And yet he can make all the plays on the football field. He works out with defensive backs. He works out with corners and safeties.
Jeff went on that same clip, and you can, by the way, see all of this as part of Before the Hedges presented by Kroger last night. But in the midst of that, Jeff went on to make a comparison between him and Isaiah Simmons, the former linebacker from Clemson, who was so impressive. He went on to talk about some of the athletic things that Carter's already done. North Gwinnett's one of those elite programs in the state of Georgia, certainly north of downtown Atlanta. It's one of probably the top programs we kind of think of as North Georgia. Carter's already done some impressive things even before his senior year there in a Georgia uniform, so there's going to be a lot to like about him, and Jeff kind of addressed a lot of that last night. But beyond this, when it comes to Carter, this for me is not just about him being a really good player and a guy that Georgia thus far I think has a pretty good relationship. It's also an example of what I think you're going to see a good bit of in this upcoming class. One of the things I think is going to be really fun about 2021 is it might have a little bit more of a state of Georgia flair to it. There might be a little bit more Georgia-centricness, if that's a word, if I can make that into a word. There may be a little bit more of a Peach State vibe, Georgia accent to this 2021 class. Let me be really clear about something for a moment. I'm not against national recruiting. In fact, some of the guys for the 2020 class that are my, I guess, sort of most favored recruits, some of the ones that I have the biggest expectations for, some of those are national recruits. Guys, not just out of the Georgia footprint, but out of the South. Guys from California or up in the D.C., Beltway area, Mid-Atlantic region. There are a lot of guys who are not from Georgia that I have big, high hopes for when it comes to being in a Georgia uniform. But admittedly, as a Georgia guy, there is just something a little bit fun to there being a little bit of a sort of, I guess, Georgia vibe. And I think the 2021 class may have some of that. Now, to his credit, when Kirby Smart talked about in-state recruiting the other day, National Signing Day on Wednesday, I thought he did a pretty good job of kind of explaining the best of both worlds situation of, hey, you do want to be open for some national recruiting, but you also want to make sure that you are taking advantage of the fact that you live in a talent-rich state like the state of Georgia is. I thought that my own personal feelings on this were probably summed up pretty well by what Kirby Smart said the other day. Let me let you hear Smart from Wednesday.
Number one, we had more interest from out-of-state kids. So we had some national interest from players that came to camp and really performed well that in the past we might have lost out on. It might have been second or third on a national kid that was a really good player, say a Darnell, say a Kendall, say a Keeley. But we won a lot of those. The other part is we lost some in-state battles that were really, really good players. And so I think the two of those merged to just kind of happen at unique positions where, hey, we'd have taken the in-state guy or we'd have taken the out-of-state guy. It just so happened we got the out-of-state guy. But we're excited for those players, and there's been a lot of good out-of-state players play here at the University of Georgia. There's no limitation to your borders, but we certainly respect and understand how good our state is and what the high school coaches do.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I think you want to leave the door open for both because we've seen, and we've talked about this in the show the last couple of days, the reasons in which Major Burns chooses Georgia or Warren Brinson chooses Georgia or Kendall Milton chooses Georgia. Their reasons for choosing Georgia say a lot about them, and it says a lot about kind of the validity that the program has from a national standpoint. Georgia as a brand, I'm talking about the University of Georgia, UGA as a brand is just bigger than it was before. And the fact that recruits celebrate that, the fact they want to come to Georgia now, it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. I think you want to keep that door open for that to take place. And yet there is just also something nice about getting some easy recruiting wins along the way. And in the state of Georgia, obviously a lot of these are contested. Rick Gilbert certainly wasn't an easy recruiting win for Georgia. No, neither was Miles Murphy and some of those other guys. You're going to lose some of those battles. But when you do have the ability to kind of get in a car and drive, an hour or so and go see someone, or in Kirby's case, fly around in a helicopter, it just does kind of set you up for a chance to get some easy wins. And when Dejon Edwards joins the class from out of Colquitt County and people in Moultrie say, oh, I watched this guy for 4 years, you're going to like him. Or if a guy like Barrett Carter goes to Georgia from Sewanee, when folks in Gwinnett County say, man, I saw this guy play a lot, UGA fans, you're going to love him. There's just kind of that nice tie when that guy from your hometown ends up being at Georgia. And I think there may be some of that when it comes to this upcoming cycle. Something else that I think is going to be really, really fun about the Georgia and the 2021 class. And listen, we've already seen Matt Luke have great success when it comes to holding on to big offensive linemen. There was a lot of that in the class of 2020. All those guys that Sam Pittman had brought in. The truth is, Georgia did a really good job of holding on to almost all of those. And Matt Luke gets a lot of the credit for kind of swooping in quick and kind of acting as a closer to make sure those commitments stayed in place and those commitments turned into signings. However, beyond that, I think there is an opportunity now to see what Matt Luke can do as a long-range recruiter. For offensive line guys, that's always been crucial, those long-range relationships. When you think about some of the names that we're going to hear about in the future of the 2021 class, guys like Amarius Mims, guys like Micah Morris, guys like Terrence Ferguson, to see Luke potentially emerge as a figure different from Sam Pittman. There'll be no yes sirs, the kind of shtick that made Pittman famous. Luke's going to have a different kind of shtick. He's going to have his own gimmicks, his own things. But to see him emerge as a face for that position group for Georgia, much the same way that Sam Pittman once did, I also think that's going to be fun as a part of the 2021 class. In fact, the clip from Luke that I love actually predates his time coming to Georgia. It's not from the interview that I did with him in January. It's back at his time at Ole Miss. He was talking about making that transition from being a position coach or a non-head coach to being a head coach. And in the midst of that, he described one of the things that I think is going to be really valuable for Georgia in this upcoming 2021 class. Let me let you hear a little bit from Matt Luke.
That's the part I enjoy. I enjoy the relationship part of coaching. To me, that's what I'm good at, and that's what I enjoy doing. And it's just a much more broader scope and getting to know more people. Instead of just focusing on 3 or 4, you're more worried about the big picture. But it's all about building relationships, and that's the part I like.
Yeah, I mean, that guy who loves building those relationships, to see him do that now, not in kind of like a speed dating version of that, which it had to be for Tate Ratledge and Broderick Jones and all those guys, but this sort of like, let me relax, get to know you a little bit, to see him become the kind of, and it's unfair to compare anybody to Sam Pittman because Pittman was so good at this for such a long time for Georgia, but to see Luke become a version of that for the 2021 class, I think that could be a really fun thing to see. And then to kind of keep on this theme of things I'm really looking forward to for this 2021 class. You know, Georgia's in the midst right now of rebuilding its brand from a quarterback standpoint, right? Jake Fromm was the starting quarterback for Georgia for a long time. He's not here this year. It's going to be Jamie Newman, or it's, you know, a guy like Carson Beck, a part of that competition, a guy like Dwan Mathis as a part of that competition. And then the 2021 class will be the sort of next chapter of, hey, this is Georgia rebuilding itself from a quarterback standpoint. And when you do bring in a 5-star, the way that Georgia has with Brock Vandegrift, and a guy that, by the way, is also from the state of Georgia, but when you bring this guy in, one of the things that you get a chance to do is kind of see what a 5-star quarterback can do for you on the recruiting trail. I certainly get the impression that Vandegrift's going to be an active part of the recruiting process. He's going to want to be at camps because I think he wants to make a push to be as elite of a recruit as he can be viewed as. There's obviously some prestige involved in that when it comes to the quarterback position. And when you are there, when you're talking to these other recruits, it just gives you a chance as a 5-star quarterback to kind of have those coattails and let people kind of ride along on that journey with you. Jeff Sentell caught up with Brock Vandagriff not all that long ago. They had a conversation. Vandagriff kind of talked about Georgia from the standpoint of feeling like a home for him, not too far from the place where he currently lives and the place where he's grown up. And the feeling that he has about Georgia in terms of the connection it's going to be for him, you certainly get the sense that this could be very useful for Georgia in a recruiting standpoint. Seeing a 5-star out there recruiting for you, paying big dividends for the class of 2021. Here's Brock Vandagriff.
And that was probably the main thing. I've been thinking about other options closer to home for probably 2 or 3 months going into like December, and I prayed about it and I talked about it with my family. But then when we were at the dinner table, every family member in Alabama, the grandparents, aunts, uncles, stuff like that. And I don't know how we got to talking about it. I didn't say anything about it. I guess it's just the Lord's timing. But someone was like, man, Oklahoma's far away. And I was like, it is. And I couldn't go to sleep that night. I was thinking about it, and I was like, I got to do something about this. I was like, I got to stay closer to home so that the people I love can be able to watch me, and I can still go hunt in Alabama on the weekends and stuff like that.
I mean, I love the way that Brock Vandagriff kind of describes the process of talking himself into Georgia being the place that he needs to be, and to have family members and everybody gather around and go through the process of saying, you know what, Oklahoma's just too far away. And if Oklahoma's just too far away, then for some other recruits, maybe LSU's too far away. Maybe Alabama's too far away. Maybe, just pick any program you want to pick that Georgia might be recruiting against. to listen to the way in which Brock Vandegrift came to the belief that Georgia was the right place for him to be, it seems easy for me to imagine that Vandegrift might also be good at convincing some of the guys, his contemporaries here in this 2021 class, that Georgia's also the right place for them to be. I think Vandegrift's presence, that 5-star quarterback in the mix here for the class of 2021, I think that's one of the things that's going to make this recruiting cycle really, really fun. And let me give you kind of one more quick one here. The other thing about 2021 that I think is going to be really interesting to see is, go back and look at the last few years. Georgia was 3rd in the country in 2017, but putting together the kind of point total, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite, that in a lot of years would have been good enough for number 1 overall. 2018, the Dogs were number 1. 2019, Georgia finished 2nd. This past year, coming back to build a number 1 class once again. To watch Georgia maintain that momentum, something that a lot of programs have not been able to do. You can make a case right now that Georgia's out-recruiting everyone in college football, maybe only by a slight margin compared to the top-end programs like Alabama, Ohio State, and those in particular. But you'd be hard-pressed to find anyone who's recruiting better than Georgia currently is. The 2021 class would be another opportunity for that to be put together. And for Georgia fans who are kind of hungry and ambitious for that national championship to come, putting together another class in 2021, the way that the 17, 18, and 19 classes have looked, the 20 class there as well, all of a sudden at that point in time, I think things around here are getting very interesting, and really no one can say they've brought in more talent than Kirby Smart has since he's been on this campus. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by our friends at Merriweather and Tharp. It's great to have you with us, no matter how you get to us today. Live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Radio Noon, Athens Sports Radio, 960 The Ref, or as a podcast, wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Really glad to have all of you with us here today, and really appreciate Merriweather and Tharp making it all possible. Now, let me be very honest with you here for a second. We just, off the top of our show here today, talked a lot about fun topics, right? Georgia putting together another elite recruiting class, finding a way to build that the way that it has been the last few years. We could talk about that for hours. Something that does not feel as much fun to talk about since subject to divorce. I totally realize that. And yet, the thing I also realize as well, in an audience as big as ours is, unfortunately, it's just a fact of life that a few of you right now may find yourself on the doorstep of having to make this decision, coming to grips with the fact that you may be about to do this. And if you are, first of all, my prayers for you. I also want to tell you that my friends at Merriweather and Tharp really can be an advocate for you. And I don't say friends lightly. I'm very, very thankful to count a lot of the folks there on the staff at Merriweather and Tharp as a very good friend, and I think you'll find them to be a tireless advocate for you. This may be your first divorce, but they've been through thousands. They can guide you through the chaos. They can give you options, strategies, and they can make recommendations to put you back on a path that you need to be. So here, let me give you a website. It's theatlantadivorceteam.com. Go to theatlantadivorceteam.com. That'll get you in touch with Merriweather and Tharp, and you'll get a chance to get back on a really good ground, a really good footing here as you move forward after a very difficult chapter. Hope you'll check them out. All right, we're going to get Buck Bellew, the former Georgia quarterback, here coming up in just a minute. Before we do that, let me take some time to go around the doghouse, and I thought that Connor Riley had a good piece. I guess it was yesterday on DawgNation.com, looking at the Georgia-Alabama game coming up in September and the fact that ESPN has kind of highlighted this as one of its top games for the 2020 season. We like the off-season content. We like looking ahead to the upcoming stuff. We'll do this later on our show today about some of the other SEC games going to make ESPN's list. But I did want to spend a minute kind of talking about the hype that's kind of already building for this Georgia-Alabama game. And a point that I think is true that's going to make the overall feeling of this game maybe a little bit different than you might expect. I think there's an assumption amongst Georgia fans that Georgia has more to prove in this game than Alabama because Georgia's lost the last 2 times it's played Alabama. Georgia's restless for a chance to win a national championship. Fans themselves are certainly restless. So I think there's a sense in which, man, Georgia goes into Tuscaloosa with something to prove. Can I make a point real quick, and you can tell me if you agree with this or not? Isn't it fair to say that Alabama truly has more to prove in this game than Georgia does? And I think that's a distinction that matters because, let's face it, I don't know that you can point to any game in the Kirby Smart era that has kind of had the feeling and the vibe around it the way this Tuscaloosa trip in September will feel. I mean, there's going to be a huge DawgNation invasion. It's going to be like this really big thing. And yes, Georgia went to South Bend in 2017. I get all of that. But that's a Notre Dame team that only won like 4 games the previous year. That was a unique experience, but it was more of a tourist attraction. At least at the time, it was thought to be that way. More of a tourist attraction than a big-time college football spot. But Bryant-Denny Stadium in September is not exactly that way. Bryant-Denny Stadium in September, given the history these two programs have against each other, given what Alabama has been under Nick Saban, this is a real kind of circled date on the football calendar. The fact that ESPN's already writing about it, I think, is the proof and the example that you need on that. However, in terms of the atmosphere being intense like Georgia fans expect to see, what if there's a little nervousness? What if there's a little anxiety on the part of Alabama? After all, Georgia may not exactly know what it's bringing to the table right now, given there's no Jake Fromm and given that, Georgia's got a new offensive coordinator and probably needed a new offensive coordinator after the way that it performed in the 2019 season. But is there any more certainty as a part of Alabama right now? After all, Tua Tagovailoa is not there. And Alabama's not quite sure he'll be turning to as a quarterback. And if you don't have Tua Tagovailoa as that high-powered quarterback anymore, then as the identity that Alabama's kind of pledged itself to over the last couple of years, can it maintain that? Or can it try to reinvent itself, going back to more of a defensive-oriented, running game-oriented team, the way that it was previously before Alabama kind of got in bed with Tua and the high-powered offense that Lane Kiffin kind of brought to bear there in Tuscaloosa? I think it's right to hype this game. And obviously on the Georgia side of this, you understand why Georgia feels like it has a lot to play for, why fans are very curious and maybe eager to see Kirby Smart become the first former Nick Saban assistant to beat his old boss on the field. But I'm not quite so sure Alabama has any less to prove. In fact, they may actually have more. And in the early stages of this game, if Alabama seems like it's not on its way to proving that kind of stuff, that it really can still be a national contender in the post-Tua Tagovailoa era, that intense stadium atmosphere that you might expect from Bryant-Denny, it might not be quite as loud as you think. Something to think about as we get towards September. Good to have you with us here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We're very busy with guests today. It's a former Georgia tight end, Troy Sadowski, coming up later on the program. I want to talk to him about a piece that I wrote yesterday at DawgNation.com, his feelings with the tight end position, including some very interesting things about the 5-star recruit, Darnell Washington. We'll do that with him. But for now, always a great thrill when we get a chance to have the national championship winning quarterback, Buck Belue, as a part of DawgNation Daily. Let's do that right now. DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. Of course, it's great to have you with us. And on video. So for those of you who are just with us, first of all, it's been a while since we've gone this late. So appreciate that. Issues on YouTube today. Apologize for that. Out of order with the broadcast. That's a little bit weird. So we're now done with the show. Buck Belue was great. Troy Sadowski was great. Commentary from me. We'll kind of throw all this back together and kind of put it up on the site as a podcast, radio show here coming up. But do want to make sure we give you some time to kind of sound off and give your thoughts on everything going on. So we'll go a little later than we have in quite some time. We'll do an R.S. Andrews cool down, and I'll thank our friends at R.S. Andrews for making all of this possible. Air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric, they do all of that for us. They can do all of that for you as well. And it's just $99, that mega furnace safety check, to make sure your system is back to factory fresh specs. Make sure you check them out, and that will be really good stuff. So let's do some of your comments here, and we shall talk about whatever you want to talk about. Terry Rickman says, if Georgia were to lose a game this year, I'm okay for the one in Tuscaloosa. Yeah, because the road team seems like you always have a little bit easier chance to kind of, avoid difficulty there when you're the road team. I think that's probably always true. Adrian Carver says the thought of bringing back the toss sweep revs her engine. Obviously, I know that's something that Troy Sadowski's been a big fan of over the years. He's talked about that before because he was a lead blocker on one of those toss sweeps. Let's see what else is going on. Drew Odom says, we have everything to prove. They have everything to lose. This is that game where we take our seat at the table or continue to eat at the kids' table. Unfortunately, that may be an apt description for that. It's a chance for Georgia to step up. And, what Georgia does have at stake here, as Drew kind of points out, if it does not go well, it kind of turns into the whole, this is the same old Georgia we thought it was. So from that standpoint, there'll be plenty of criticism for Georgia if it doesn't win the game. I think that's probably true. Doug Rayburn says, we've whipped them all over the field. Now it's time to do that on the scoreboard. I like that from Doug. Keith Fold says, I'd like to beat Bama in Tuscaloosa, but we can lose there and still win the SEC and get to the playoff. That is true. That is true. You don't leave yourself much margin for error, but that's probably true. By the way, I was lucky enough to be at Tuscaloosa when Georgia won there in 2002, and then again when Georgia won there in 2007. So take it for what it's worth. I'm undefeated all time attending games in Tuscaloosa. Richard Smith says he agrees, but Georgia needs to close the deal, and I think that's probably true. James Crump says this is an interesting analogy. He says us beating Alabama would be like South Carolina women beating UConn. It means nothing now because we are better, but to us fans in the national media, it means a lot because Alabama is still the standard, just like UConn and women's basketball. It's kind of an interesting comparison from James. Well done, James. Tony Burson says, if we only lose to Alabama once, we will still make the playoffs. Yeah, 11-1 Georgia, if the only loss came in Tuscaloosa, is still certainly a strong contender for the playoffs. Matthew McGay, he says it's time to put the dagger in Alabama. And I think that's another way to look at this, that the interesting possibility that I think the Saban era in general is kind of teetering just a bit. And I've said this before, that I don't know that Saban's got the stomach for kind of a non-playoff version of Alabama. They didn't make the playoff this year. And I think there's some real questions about what this organization and team, two different things, or at least slightly different ideas, organization and team is going forward. And to think that after having lost the Iron Bowl, not being in the playoff, really outclassed in every way by LSU, and then have Orgeron spike the football on you when the game is over. If Alabama were to follow all of that up by also losing to Georgia very early in the season, then I think that you really could. You just say put a dagger in them. That would feel like a little bit of a dagger to me, Matthew. It would. I'd be very curious to see the extent to which Alabama could come back from that. I think that's a fair point. Phil Rogers says Feinbaum won't give us any slack till we beat Nick Saban. I mean, that's something that Kirby needs to do. He needs to be the former Saban assistant to get the first win against Saban, because of all the former Saban assistants, I think he's the most qualified to do so. Now, Jimbo's obviously in that group there as well, and Jimbo's going to have himself a pretty good team this year. But you certainly don't want someone to do that before Kirby Smart gets a chance to. Tony Burson also mentioning a point that we've talked about before in terms of what Saban said on National Signing. A little bit of a weird comment from Saban on that. Mike Little says, Brandon, I'd love to go to the game and hang out with you and talk some Georgia football. We're going to do, first of all, Mike, I'd love to see you as well, and we're going to do a DawgNation Invasion. Now, we don't quite know yet what form it's going to take, but we're already having some conversations about that. I'm probably not supposed to say that, but expect to hear something from us on that. Adrian Carver says, this is our time. I have faith in my dogs taking down Bama. I've already made my hotel reservations in Birmingham. Nothing available in Tuscaloosa. Yeah, Tuscaloosa is not an easy place to get a hotel. It's not a very big town. Birmingham a little easier because it's just a little bit bigger city, and there are a lot of ways to get hotel rooms in Birmingham. Tuscaloosa, you got to be pretty quick on the trigger to get any kind of room there. It's not well served by hotels. For a long time, Athens kind of wasn't either. I think Athens is probably a little bit better shape from a hotel standpoint than it used to be. Still kind of a small town, not a lot of hotel options. But, yeah, if you're looking for those overnight accommodations, Birmingham and driving 59 to get to Tuscaloosa is going to end up being probably your better bet there all the way around. All right, we're going to have to get ready to go here in just a little bit. We'll have a lot more time for your comments on tomorrow's show. I also want to tell you about DawgNation Daily being on the road coming up. We're going to be at the Atlanta International Auto Show coming up on February the 28th. It's the 38th annual. I'd love to have you come join us there. Now, the event itself runs from February 26th through to March the 1st. It's at Building C there in the Georgia World Congress Center, but we're going to be there on Friday, February 28th. We'll be there when the doors open. We're going to do our show live the normal time, and then the doors open at noon. We'll be there, so please come see us. Of course, you know what the auto show is all about. Latest new cars, SUVs, and trucks. Over 24 manufacturers will be represented, and you got special attractions as well. Cousin Eddie's RV from Christmas Vacation. Exotic cars from Caffeine and Octane, a whole lot more as well. Adult tickets, $12. Kids 6 through 12 are $6. Kids 5 and under are free. Now, there's also discounts available for heroes and seniors, so please visit this website, GoAutoShow.com. That's GoAutoShow.com for a lot more details. All right, I'll also remind you to check out the AJC for your Atlanta news now, a great way to stay updated on everything that happens around the AJC. You can check that out. Of course, Georgia had its board meetings, athletic association meetings yesterday. You can get some coverage of that at the AJC. Good stuff there always. Weather, even still today, a lot of rain this morning. Is the rain here? Is it staying around for a while? What's going on? You can find out more about that at ajc.com. And kind of a weird situation at the Atlanta airport where a little bit of a ceiling piece collapsed. There's breaking news on that up at ajc.com here today. And I mentioned before, Georgia Tech lost to, beat Louisville last night in basketball. Kind of a rough look to see that program seemingly getting better. At the same time, Georgia's not quite doing so well. So not too good all the way around. But spring training has started. Pitchers and catchers have reported. So read about that at the AJC as well. So why don't we do this? We haven't done Gator Hater Updater yet. Let's fire up the fight song. We'll wrap up the show. And it has certainly been a weird day today, but we appreciate it. All right, good stuff here today all the way around. Thanks for being here. And I guess something I better mention, although I didn't really want to. Another disappointing basketball loss for Georgia, right? And this one of maybe the least competitive of this series of losses against South Carolina last night. I'm not quite sure what you do with that all the way around. It's probably especially not a great look that a team that you beat earlier in the year, Georgia Tech, seems to be getting better. Beat Louisville. They're doing it with defense. They're doing it by rebounding. They're doing it with some older players. It's just a completely different formula than what Georgia seems to be putting together right now. I'm just not quite sure what to say about Georgia basketball at this point in time. It needs to be better than it is. I guess I'm going to choose to be patient here. But it's a little bit of a mess right now. There's no question about that. Let me also remind you, something that's not a mess, something that's great, Gator Hater Updater, 1,202 days. Thanks for being here, DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. And for those of you on video, we'll do more R.S. Andrews Cool Down with you tomorrow, a lot more of your comments, and a whole bunch of fun. Y'all have a good day, and I'll see you back here tomorrow, 10 a.m. for another episode of DawgNation Daily, presented by Merriweather and Tharp. We'll look forward to talking to you then. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.